Welcome to our first slideshow presentation on the planets, the diurnal the diurnal team, which means the planets that sort of have dominion over the daytime when the sun is above the horizon. That's Saturn, Jupiter, and benefic Mercury, and the sun, of course, but we've made a separate presentation for the sun in the luminaries slideshow and video. You can go to astrovedicus.wordpress.com for our blog on Jyotish and herbalism and things like that. Let's begin. So here's a relative comparison of the size of the gas giants in the back, Jupiter, Saturn, with the more personal inner planets of Earth, Venus, Mars, Venus, Mercury, the moon. They're so tiny compared to these huge gravitational forces that actually act on the sun and pull the sun back as the sun, as they're spinning around the sun. So the smallest one we'll start with is Mercury the Merchant. I love this image because it kind of, to me, is a perfect representation of Mercury positionally being very close to the sun. And the story of Icarus, I'm not sure if you all are familiar, but with mythology, but mythology is really important. And there's going to be a lot of information in these slides, but you just kind of have to let it wash over you, see what you resonate with. Mercury is so close to the sun that it might, we can see his entire orbit from the Earth around the sun, and he's the quickest, fastest moving. As such, he's generally associated with a winged creature who is delivering messages, and he's kind of like the errand boy of the gods. So other names of Mercury are Hermes, Aravan, Icarus, Thoth, Neba, Nabu, Borsippa. These are all kind of like stories and concepts of like the ideas of this mercurial being, who basically represents media, meddling, trickery, manipulation, the mind, messages, information, communication, in a good sense, right? So like those are the good things generally, is our ability to debate, our eloquence, our discrimination, our cultural refinement, these kind of things as well. Those are the height of Mercury. But when debilitated, Mercury can be kind of frenetic and argumentative, leading to discord through the disorganization of the mind. So each planet, as I go through them, is going to have a higher and a lower state, exalted or a debilitated form. So Mercury also, when debilitated, will have shallow superficiality, slander, lies, boasting, using communication for self kind of like projection, self-promotion. Here's a good form of Mercury teaching: the lower education, the beginning motor skills and languages. That's kind of the time Mercury rules, is that time in the brain development when we begin sort of discerning between what is me and not me, self, what is mother, what is father, talking, blah, 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 these kind of things. Jupiter rules university stuff, higher education. Mercury rules lower education. It's important. Here we have the two again in different ages. Cupid, basically Jupiter and Venus are the benefics, and Mercury kind of works for them. And whenever Mercury is functioning as a benefic, he's sort of aligning with their messages, because Mercury himself doesn't really have his own agenda. He works for others and is kind of servile to others. He's the prince, not the king, right? I love this idea of Mercury being the love letter that brings two souls together to rejoice in being and to enjoying the curiosities and delights of the earth, because Mercury rules the earth element, as we'll see later. Mercury is the bridge between is the perception and the senses used as a bridge, or applied as a bridge between the internal to the external, subconscious to the conscious, the dream to the waking, the underworld to the heavens, the micro to the macro. So he reveals that which is hidden and hides that which is visible, right? So he can bring things in and out of our consciousness and develop things or leave things undeveloped. So as such, our mind goes where our attention goes. And that's why developing and controlling our senses is important to right intelligence. Because we want to move towards super consciousness, or developing towards the collective consciousness and heightened awareness, right? Because lower forms of Mercury will permeate down below towards the collective unconscious, tamasic things, ignorance, impulse, acting out of, without being able to discriminate or to discern or to differentiate between what is good for me and what is bad for me, what is setting me up for success, what is setting me up for failure. Moving through the subconscious dream world to the conscious realm, and then, to the realm of higher consciousness. Mercury is all throughout the scale and all throughout this spectrum. Thoth is the Egyptian version of Mercury, represented by a baboon and sometimes an ibis, which is a bird. The monkey mind, right? Curiosity, focus issues here, right? You're curious about everything. You want to know everything. You can't sit still. Your soul, it's playful. It's excited. It's happy to be on this planet. That's Thoth. But also the other version is the more solemn and demure, serious, sacred scribe. That's more officious, accounting, mathematics, and those other versions of Mercury. But they're both represented, right? As there's the mature form and then the very childish form. Nabu is the Assyrian or the Babylonian version, kind of the cosmic scribe as well. Right, his symbol is for writing, and he has a strong sort of bond with serpents. We see the caduceus staff on the bottom left that came from the rod of Asclepius, who's the Greek god of healing, who would heal people in dream states. You would come to Asclepios' temple, you would take some herbs and fall asleep, and you would go to the realm of the subconscious to heal things that were wrong with you. Well, that sort of echoes a lot of mercurial themes, doesn't it? As being someone who can travel through the, underworld of the subconscious to the realm of the heavens. He's the only god or the only deity who can do that and gets such unrestricted access. And this knowledge is typically symbolized by serpents, because if you're a scribe or someone writing something, you want to sort of invoke the energy of the serpent, because that will help your work that you're writing to endure across the ages, as the serpent wisdom does, right? They are ancient creatures, dragons, which Nabu rides in the top left. The Sigda, which is the goddess of the cosmic scribe in another ancient culture, I forget at this moment. But basically, there's that repeating theme of two serpents intertwining, that Kundalini symbol of ancient primordial power that sits within us all. Also there's the serpent and the tree of knowledge in the Genesis story of the Christian Bible, which shows the serpent as being the bearer of a tool that can be used for good or evil. The knowledge itself isn't necessarily bad, just like serpent venom can be used for medicine or it can be used for poison, right? And the cardiologists know that the best drugs for the heart come from viper venom of like Southeastern Asian islands, right? These beautiful snakes that warn us of their neurotoxic proteins, that we then, with the will, with the ability, with the technology, with the science of Mercury, we were able to purify and to harness that serpent power. You see what I'm getting at here? We have to stop looking at the snake as in the Christian view as being a demon, because it represents more technology and medicine. And if a culture thinks a snake is a demon, it makes sense that their medical industry is going to fail. Nabu, here we have more information. Mercury in Indian thought is Buddha. Bodhan, knowledge, represents intelligence or the awakening of consciousness. Vid, knowing. Priyakrit, doing kindness. Child of the moon. So the moon being a representation of the mind and Mercury being the child of the mind shows that inherent connection. You know, Buddha was the only, is the avatar of Vishnu that we use to sort of symbolize him. And he's the only avatar that was kind of like born as a human and became divine through this unfolding of consciousness, right? So that's keywords there: transient, changing, differentiating, movement, unfolding. Also, when Buddha wrote down his information, or when he disseminated it or transmitted it to his disciples, he was activating his mercurial capacity to transmit this wisdom, to help others discern between which is false, asat, from sat, which is truth. So cognizing the things of the material plane first, then he would teach them, after learning to see the truth, you can see the spirit within the material manifested reality. He had innumerable disciples that followed him endlessly and were devoted to him. He was so talented at transmitting the wisdom of his newfound state of enlightenment. So here's a lot of things you can kind of go over at your own leisure. There are qualities and things represented by Mercury. He rules Earth, the sense of smell and chemical information. The primary powers in the anus through excretion, which are the sort of smelly parts of us, right? The sense of smell is our excrement. So Mercury rules that. It's also how we diagnostically can tell when something's wrong with us, right? That's why we use the malasanga, the wastes of the body, to see if there is an issue. So that smell, that olfactory capacity in Mercury is huge. The dosha of Mercury in mercurial people will be tridoshic. They'll have a balance, but they're often vata predominant, or can have a more visible vata flavor. The part of self is the consciousness spoken, the spoken word, the meaning derived behind sounds, right? Jupiter rules sounds, as we'll get to, but Mercury rules the interpretation of those sounds and meaning them and assimilating them into some type of truth or non-truth. The kingdom he represents the crown prince, that which is closest to the sun, like it is astronomically, rules the Asiatic people. Regions where you have to be clever enough to survive because of the extreme conditions, those are mercurial people. The function of Mercury is wealth, so represents people who promote themselves through, media or acting, management, actors, spokespeople, TV hosts, doctors as well, medical people. The presiding deity is Vishnu, because Mercury is in all things, omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient, knowing all. So it makes sense that Vishnu is the maintainer of the manifested reality, would represent Mercury. Mercury doesn't have a gender because Mercury is a balance of yin and yang. The tissue represented by Mercury is skin, cell membranes, and coverings of the body. And similarly, Mercury rules containers, jars, and vessels, things that can hold liquids or food or whatever, what have you. To compartmentalize, right, is a mercurial trait, and to put things in jars. And you can even put your thoughts in jars and store them away, or even hide them and bury them in your unconscious. You have to use your mercurial capacity to make things visible or make things invisible, like we said earlier. He rules the proteins of the body. He rules places of play, recreation. The time he rules is seasons. Because he rules Earth, of course, he's going to represent the differentiation of the times on Earth. There's 6 seasons in the Vedas, in the Vedic in Hindu thought, that each are about 2 months each. The rasa, the flavor of Mercury, is umami, the combination of all flavors. That makes sense. He's a mixture. He likes to mix. Emotions are the balanced emotional state by which all other emotions are judged. It's from our sense of balance we can perceive the intensity of our extremes. The plants Mercury rules are plants without fruit. The garments are well taken care of, but they're not new clothes that he rules. They're cherished clothes. He rules the harvest, or the time when plants have matured to their fullness, their full capacity, and he rules the animal kingdom and the great differentiation of all the different types of life on Earth, all the variations of butterflies and frogs and trees and or rather animals, specifically, not plants. But things that live in the trees, that's all Mercury. He rules the magic and alchemical magic, spells, mantra, esoteric, and occult magic because of the spoken word. He's an auditory learner. He represents poets and messengers, writers. Mercurial people will often be talking to themselves. He's a balanced moisture and heat. His nature is mixed. He can adapt to any situation. His grain is green mung bean. His gemstone is emerald. He rules the ages of 3 to 12 when, as we mentioned, number is 4, stability in the manifested reality. He exalts in Virgo. He's debilitated in that sign of Pisces. That's important. That means in your chart, if your Mercury is in Virgo, that means your Mercury will have that more benefic, more to that strength. And the debilitated qualities we were talking about usually come in a more Piscean, watery sign, right? Mercury likes being in his own sign. He rules Virgo. He doesn't like being in the more emotional, wet, humid sign of Jupiter. Friends of Mercury are Sun and Venus. Neutral is Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Of course, Mercury is going to have more neutral relationships. And then the enemy of Mercury is the moon, which is interesting that there's so many lunar indications, right? Thoth being a lunar god, Nabu as well, and then Hermes Trismegistus, which is a combination of Thoth and Mercury to form this alchemical deity. It's very interesting. This is a prayer to Mercury, which we will I'll skip through it, but you can use this to align yourself with mercurial energy. Basically, it just gives you buzzwords and keywords that you need to, that you can just look over to get, what is Mercury for? What does Mercury do again? Oh yeah, look at this invocation. Mercury, the master, the virtuous, the honest, the smart, the articulate, the understanding, the debater, the knowledgeable with all arts, the cautious, the writer, the useful for money, the useful for trade, the cunning, the oath keeper, the intelligent, the helper, the patient, the skillful, the kind, the preventer, the supporting, being obedient, the servile, being patient, being merciful and companionate, kindness, quietness, enrich my life, O great curious one, with the wonders of your speech, writing intelligence. That's from the Gayat al-Hakim, or the goal of the wise, which is an ancient sort of magical text. Jupiter is what we're going to move on to now. Deus Peter, Dies Pater, Enlil, Marduk, Zeus, Brihaspati, Jove, Thor. These are all different names of Jupiter cross-culturally. This is a cross-cultural study after all. The great, generous, golden guide rules imagination, doctrine, theory, belief, expansion, generosity, magnificence. That's just the general themes, right? Indian thought is the Dharma Karaka, service and charity, fortune, auspiciousness, wisdom, learning, and children. He gives these things, rules things, indicates these things. Basically, Jupiter expresses joy. That's where we get the word jovial. It expresses the the loyalty, the daring, the magnanimity. God, that's a hard word. It's a symbol of the aspiration to high ideals reached through honorable and just means. So like honor, nobility, religiosity, spiritual inclination, philosophy. These are all the higher forms of Mercury. But like I said, there's 2 forms to each. There's 2, a higher and a lower state. Generally, the lower state of Jupiter we will see as extravagance, excess, right? Addiction, alcoholism, fraudulent actions, hypercritical religiosity, dogma, imposing the will on others, pompous, boastful of knowledge, self-promoting beyond one's ability, right? Expressing itself in a rude manner. I am holier than thou. Intolerance, religious intolerance, right? Ignorance and carelessness are also things that Jupiter can, in a debilitated state, can represent, right? Because if I'm too focused on zooming out, whereas Mercury zooms in, Jupiter zooms out. And Jupiter is a benefic planet, but there's definitely that malefic capacity or that bad side of Jupiter where there is negligence because Jupiter doesn't want to be bothered with the finer details of things. Not always, right? Here's images of Thor, who's sort of in this sky god, lightning bearer. He's illuminating the darkness with the power of his firm, forceful, uh, a very masculine, a very young, a very a force to be reckoned with, we could say, a force of order, or his perceived sense of order. Um, One, he's kind of fighting a demon and a dragon, a Viking. This is kind of like of Viking Nordic thought. Here we have, again, we have on the left Jupiter being associated with the white dove, or the birds of intelligence, birds of purity, but also birds of virility, right? And also in his right hand, he has a lightning bolt there. Indra as well, the sky god, has a lightning bolt. So there's that lightning bolt, that Zeus symbolism that Jupiter has, of king of the sky, that has the judgment bolts, right? That sends them flying and is kind of hot-tempered and can be angered. The Indian version on the right shows Jupiter's color, which is yellow in the Hindu system, Jyotish. We see the great wisdom of the elephant and Brihaspati, Guru, the great Guru, the heavy, the elephant is heavy in knowledge. And we see Guru there holding some scroll, some text, Shankada conch, and of the element of sound and ether. And then we have the chakra, the sun's light, or the rays of the sun. In Indian thought, the avatar of Vishnu is Vamana, which means short stature. There's a story basically where a small boy makes a deal to get ownership of 3 strides of land. He goes to this demon, right? And he's like, please give me 3 steps. If I take 3 steps, let me have ownership of that land. He was warned that this was a trip, but he still let the boy do it because he was like this act of penance. So the boy moves, Vamana moves, who's actually Jupiter, or Vishnu as Jupiter. His first step, he covers the entire world. The second step, he covers the entire of all the heavens. And in this third, he leaves it up to the king, where do you want me to place my third step? And he requests for him to place it on his head. And so it's this deep penance and this deep surrender that happens, that this little boy, this representation of innocence, and it's a representation of scale as power, right? Here we see he's larger than the entire earth, this little boy. So Jupiter is all about scale and tends to magnify and grow and enlarge and increase wealth, right? He spreads wealth, spreads knowledge, increases knowledge. There's this fertile aspect to Jupiter. And a strong Jupiter can see the big picture and think of others. That's where we get this aspect of charity and goodwill and benefics, right? He's the greater benefic because he's massively tries to do good. There's an effort, or he's stimulated by the want to do good, or to increase and develop the consciousness of others. Wealth and all that. Vishnu then said, at the end of this whole affair, as Vamana, he says, when I want to destroy a man, I grant him all the wealth in the world because he loses his true nature in the material realm. And if I want to save a man from this delusion, I take away all. Rid of his faulty desire, he becomes mine. So, the benefics in our life, Venus and Jupiter, they give things, and when things are bad, things are removed. Their graces are withheld from us. So when we are working with Jupiter, we have to move away from me and my, and move to thou and thine and the collective consciousness, and pray for all beings, not just our temporary, limited, temporal self. Names of Jupiter are Guru, heavy, heavier in knowledge. Suraguru, Suracharya, Devamantri, Devajya, teacher of the divinities. Sureshta, desired by gods. Vachaspati, Vagisha, Lord of mantra and sound, right? The Bij mantra, the sounds that come from us that are sort of, that emanate from us. That's all Jupiter. Brihaspati, Lord of prayer, right? The vibrational healing power of word. Arya, Suri, honorable sage. Apremeya, immeasurable. Sam, siddhi karma, connected with successful work. Puruhuta, invoked by many. So here we have the disciple-teacher relationship that Guru so often represents. And in the chart, he will often bring a teacher to you. We can see in the picture that the wealth of knowledge, the river is flowing down from the mountains of the ancestors, or whatever ancestral hard-earned realm, the higher realms, flowing down to the stream into the mind of the student. You'll see the Brihaspati is wearing warm gold tones, right? That's this kind of thing. And the student's wearing white. Jupiter rules Sagittarius and Pisces, rules the direction northeast. Ether, because he rules mantra and chanting, his element is ether. There was, in the middle of nothingness when the universe was created, the disturbance that caused all these violent eruption and coalescence of gases and dust and explosions, all of that happened by the disturbance of sound vibrations moving through empty space. So he rules the sense of hearing, and his primary power is in the vocal cords, the generative organ of sound. He's the kapha dosha type, so he tends to be larger in body and larger frame, retains water, swelling, tumors, growths. These are all kind of Jupiter. The part of self is the knowledge of joy, the joy in knowledge, and delighting in truth. The kingdom is the counselor. He's the counselor role to the gods. He's like your pope, psychologist, philosophy, confessor. Races are the Middle East and North Africa. Kind of the types of earliest civilizations and the most religiously influencing religions come from, most influencing religions come from or are ruled by Jupiter. The function I didn't write here, but we're going to say moksha. I don't know why I skipped that. But the function of Jupiter is liberation or develop the consciousness. The caste is Brahman, religious roles, Sattva, true essence, clarity. The presiding deity is Indra, as I said earlier, the conqueror of the senses, the solar deity who is the power of the people, the powerful illumination through his thunderbolt. Yang, masculine, he rules the fats of the body, the stored nutrients and the stored energy, the stored chi. He rules banks and treasuries, places where you store your wealth, and he rules the lunar month, which is the lunation from one moon to the next. And this is very important for religious festivities, which are denoted and signified by Jupiter. His taste is sweet, nourishing, and fattening things, and as such, the emotion he gives from that taste is happiness, love, and joy. He rules fruit-bearing plants, seed-bearing plants, rules the frosty time of winter. Kingdom is the human because he rules the human brain and thought. The Veda is the Rig Veda. He rules that scripture, the quality of awe of the elementals, and that awe and that religious amazement at nature is the foundation for all religion. And then from that amazement, we observe the nature, and from that observation of nature, we harness the healing powers, and we can understand the energetic system of nature so that we live rightly within it, right? Learner is, the Jupiterian learner is learning as long as he respects the teacher and can learn in any ways. It's just a great student. But tends to end up being a significator for a teacher, right? They're the type of learner that will end up surpassing the teacher. People are law, politicians, professors, religion, and social capital positions. He's hot, but he's of moderate moisture. His nature is delicate and subtle. So he can be diplomatic and social and graceful. His garments are yellow garments, religious clothing, things that are clean. His grain is chickpea, garbanzo beans. We can make offerings of that to him. Gemstone is the yellow topaz. He rules the age 32 to 50 years old, which is our peak, productivity time, when we have our ambition, our child rearing, our pleasure from mental gifts, as health declines, right? If we develop our Jupiter as we get older and our bodies become frail, we're less bothered by, we're less threatened by our inability to move or work, or because we've developed we've set ourselves up for retirement by developing our spiritual and mental faculties. He rules in number 5, which is luck, growth, and he's exalted in the Cancer, the house of the moon. He's exalted in the emotional, watery sign of Cancer, and he's debilitated. He's weakest in the house of Saturn, Capricorn. There's too many restrictions on him there. Is naturally. Oh, why did I do that? Well, Saturn wanted. Oh my God! You see how Saturn wanted to? Saturn was like, "Hurry up, friends! Our Sun, Moon, and Mars. Neutral is Saturn, and the inimical is Moon." Here's an invocation to Jupiter. Peace be upon you, O holy happy master, hot with mild humidity, the beautiful, the knowledgeable, the honest, the rightful, the just, the fair, the wise in religion, the apathetic, the powerful. I ask you, Father, in the name of all your beautiful, generous manner and your valuable deeds, to open the gates of knowledge, to reveal the divine mechanism of the heavenly spheres. I ask this of you, the core of all the good things, and the one that makes all requests successful, beneficent, and without obstacle. Om Hrim Shrim Blim Maim Glum Gradapatya Brihaspatya Vim Taim Tasvaha Om Gram Grim Grom Suh Gurave Namaha Om Zram Drim Drom Suh Gurave Namaha Om Namo Bhagavat Vamana Devaja. These are all mantra for Jupiter. Saturn Kevan Soran Shamash Kronos Kaivan Kimha Anu Ninurt. I wouldn't say Anu, actually. I'm going to take that out. Well, it's hard to mix, it's hard to get precise. Anu, okay, let's say Anu because of the workings of the sky. Yeah, I can see that. Ninurta because of, as a goddess, Assyrian goddess of like plowing and agriculture. Ninib. Eli, which is a biblical story of infertility, fate, and curses. The old sun, the best sun, the old power. So Saturn is, whereas Jupiter was the great benefic, Saturn is the great malefic, or the great cruel planet, and brings about cruel things. He's considered the mill of time and that grinds us all down. You see him there with his scythe flying about through the destruction of an old civilization, kind of, that's his jam. That's what he does best. He's Durosha Karaka, he gives durability, endurance. He's Jarana Karaka, significator of age, and the elderly in Niyama Karaka, so of law, limitations, and penance, and right action with society and within oneself. The Saturnian, the temple of Saturn was the Roman bank. I think that's interesting. Or kind of the state treasury. He was seen as the god of generation, dissolution, plenty, wealth, agriculture, periodic renewal, and liberation. Well, if he's going to be all those things, he has to also represent bondage, which he very much is. And the liberation because of his role in bondage, right? He cuts you free from the spider's web, but he also puts you on the spider's web in the first place. So from the movie that you all know that's very famous, which I will not say, or maybe it's just a stock photo, not from a movie. I don't know. But it's an image of a dark being, right? Who seems immortal in some way, or beyond the touch of time, but sharp and pointy and airy. He's also, in the other image, kind of a nice old man with a scythe who's, moving people along and making sure that the years are affecting us all and doing their jobs and shaping us, right? He's kind of that erosive, corrosive point. In Indian thought, Saturn is Kurma. So there's the story of these two demons kind of like churning an ocean with a snake, and they wrap it around this mountain, but they need somebody to hold up the mountain for all the churning of the milk ocean to take place. Well, Vishnu was like, okay, I'm going to turn myself into a turtle. Turns himself into a turtle, and unbeknownst to everyone, he's doing this silent, unpraised, unappreciated work of support. That's important because Kuruma rules work that goes unnoticed, is brutal, but is necessary for these great deeds to happen, and this great progress and achievement to happen. And Kuruma is also bringing together demons and angels, and that's kind of how fate and time and karma works as well. It brings us all together for collective goals, which is to develop consciousness all together. The names of Saturn are Shani, Manda, Shanaishchara, Pangu, slow, lame. So he can't move very fast, and that's because he moves slowly through the sky. He spends 2.5 years per sign in the zodiac, so he's very slow and takes around 28 years to go around the sun. So Shani, or Krishna, Kala, Asita, dark, grim. He's in the sky. He's kind of grayish, dark, foreboding. Chayasutta, Chayasunu, child of the shadow. He's the son of the sun and the goddess of shadows. So he's kind of like and he's their illegitimate child. Saturn is. So he's kind of, that's why he's represents kind of miserable things as well. Because he's the bridge between two irreconcilable concepts of light and shadow. Saturn is there through the ages, kind of overseeing or watching the mechanism of how the shadow realms and the light realms interact. This is all really esoteric, and I get that, but it's important to kind of understand that there's bigger concepts of the planets, and they represent these larger ideals and concepts, and they can also represent things that are very physical, of a very physical and tangible, such as a profession, right? Like these attributes of Saturn. Saturn rules Capricorn and Aquarius, rules the direction west, is the element of air in the sense of touch. As such, his primary powers to the hands and labor and the sort of that intelligence in our hands. The dosha is Vata, meaning he tends to give great diseases, as Vata in Ayurvedic medicine tends to be the dosha that, when goes out of balance, is responsible for 60% of all illnesses. The part of the self that Saturn represents is sorrow, dukkha, emptiness, loss. The kingdom he represents is the menial, the hardworking, the laborers. He also rules, because his color is black, he rules people with dark black skin or dark skin, the Melanesian, Aboriginal, and Native Africans. His function, again, I didn't write this one. I wonder why. I must not want to. Saturn's reason for coming to the planet, I guess, would be work, dharma. The function, the caste is the Sudras. So there's kind of like the tamasic survivors, people that kind of just don't develop their senses past a primal or basic thing, which is okay, but it's called Sudras. I guess there's a lack of refinement there. But tamas is the guna, which is troubles that can never be overcome, are represented by Saturn. And Saturn is moved to action in order to get himself out of trouble or out of pain. So suffering is the impetus for self-improvement, just like how you kick a donkey. So Saturn is like tamasic and slow and ignorant, and will only work whenever, he's totally obligated, or there's a sense of pressure or weight or anxiety or suffering or suffrage or bondage, or these kind of heavier themes in life. Isolation, you have to be isolated to do Saturn's work. All of this stuff creates mental issues. So Saturn represents a lot of mental dysfunction. His presiding deity is Yama and death. Because he's the border of the solar system, or perceived solar system, the edge of the visible, he was perceived by the ancient peoples as being the mechanism of, or the bringer of death. I don't see him as death. I see him as being fate more, but because there's usually, Yama is the god of death, but they can be kind of tied together in a lot of instances. He's also associated with Brahma, the creator's veil, right? Whenever manifested reality happens, so did the illusion. And so Saturn represents the pain we experience as a result of ignorance and illusion. He's yin, he's receptive to duty with his yin side, and yang, he carries them out. So he's both feminine and masculine. He's not gender non-conforming. So I would say they, but I keep saying he for just because it's easy, and they're planets, they don't have gender at all, really. But we're just kind of talking about their expression, the way their energy moves outward or inwardly, right? That's what we mean when we mean gender. So gender is a complex thing, I get that. Dhatu, the tissue is snaya, or the ligaments, the connective tissues, the ligands, things that join things together. The ligands are the things that, Mercury was proteins. Well, Saturn represents the ligands that connect those proteins in different chains and in different shapes that make, different genetic structures. It's all very complex, the way that Saturn and Mercury work together throughout the body and throughout life. The place that Saturn's rules are places of rubbish, junkyards, that's easy, ugly places, forgotten places, abandoned places, derelict places. Kala, the time that references Sama, 1 solar year. So it's the slowest of the measurements, and so Saturn is, being the slowest planet, is assigned that time measurement of Kala, or of Sama. The rasa, the flavor of Saturn is astringent. It's the flavor of cold, right? If constriction was a flavor, it would be astringent, because your mouth gets dry. You want to immediately eat something sweet to get your mouth wet again, or something sour. Emotions, therefore, because of the taste is astringent, the emotions that Saturn represents are choking fear, tightening of the lungs, and objective hatred. He rules ugly plants, retired people, people with jobs that are of cleaning, pastoral jobs, jobs of isolation, jobs that manipulate the earth. He rules the cold periods of Capricorn and Aquarius, which are both the signs of the zodiac that he rules. So that's convenient. He rules used clothes, worn objects, worn things, second-hand things, or more like fourth-hand things. The Dhatu, or the kingdom he represents, are the metamorphic rock. So any type of gem or precious metal or thing that has to be formed by the pressure and the grinding time of the earth, inside the earth, that's going to be Saturn, right? Because there's this metamorphosis. That's what he does on our consciousness too, is the same way he acts on gems. He makes us stronger by giving us obstacles. And he also represents barriers and things like that. And the Veda, he doesn't represent any learned knowledge, because teacher of Saturn is experience. It's through life experience that he teaches and learns. His moisture is cold and dry. He's Vata. His nature is hard and cruel. His grain is sesame seeds. The gemstone you want to wear to work with Saturn energy is sapphire, Nila. The old age is the Saturnian age, where Vata prevails. The withdrawal of life force is when our body gets cold and dry. We get arthritis. We get these constrictive, things like that. The connective tissues of the body get cracky and snap and blah, blah, blah. Replacing different organs. Things just kind of start losing their vitality, losing their moisture because of Saturn's dryness. He rules the number 7. And then this, esoterically, 7 the inner does not match the outer, and it's kind of like an odd number that's searching for completion from lack. It's also there's a heightened energy when you're working with septagrams, but it's also an unstable number. The exaltation of Saturn is in Libra, where he can be in Venus's house, or Venus's sign. And that gives Saturn some ability to, that diplomacy and that perspective of Venus, that Venusian softness, goes a long way to help orient Saturn in a way that is less destructive. The debilitation of Saturn, therefore, would be the opposite sign, which is Aries, where the sun is exalted. And Saturn is debilitated there because of the disruptive, fiery, warlike Aries, which Saturn is not into. Saturn's friends are Mercury and Venus, neutral to Jupiter, and these enemies are Sun, Moon, and the Mars. O spirits of the great master, rule the great name and great importance. The cold, the dark, the beneficent, the honest, the friendliness, the faithful. The only matchless ruler that will always and without fail keep his agreements. The far, the one that keeps his promises. The exhausted, the hard worker. The only one with such sadness and burden. The one that strays away from happiness and joys. The old, the experienced, the double crosser, the deceiver, the wise, the understanding. Great fixer, the destroyer. You make seekers miserable when you give them bad fortune. You make them happy when you give them good fortune. I ask you, the first Father, in the name of your gods and your generous manners, to give me the endurance and long life to reach the far shore of the Vedas. So this was all of our planets wrapped up for this solar sect, right? And next we're going to do the nocturnal sect, which is Mars and Venus. And then check out the presentation on the luminaries for the sun and the moon. So my blog, again, is astrovedicus.wordpress.com. Email me with any questions, comments, concerns, diatribes. All right, thank you.